This one wrapped up the flashback nicely and gave us some exposition and some background as to Brook, what happened to his crew, and how he ended up in the precarious predicament we found him in. One Piece chapter 487, that song. Well, hello, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation. I, as always, am Jim, and I'm here to bring you another review on the awesome and flashback-centric tale of One Piece. Now, our last chapter, of course, really ended off with us going into a flashback as Brook sat down to start playing the piano for everybody, and of course we found out he's a very talented musician that can play almost virtually any instrument. He started to play the tune of Bink's Brew, and this, coupled with the fact that Luffy told him that they had met Laboon, you know, obviously at the Cape, right by the lighthouse and Crocus and everything like that, after going, you know, up and then down Reverse Mountain onto the Grand Line, certainly that started to stir up memories and wound up kind of bringing us back to when they first met up with Laboon when he was just a baby. And he must have got separated from his pod, and really, you know, it was just kind of that the music that they had on board just kind of seemed to make the whale happy, you know. So anyway, so that's where the chapter ends off, and this one takes place entirely in flashback, and it's flashback, and then it's flashback within a flashback. It actually starts out and right where it left off in the last chapter, and we see that prior to even entering the Grand Line, the pirates over here, the Rumbar Pirates, I believe that they were called. The Rumbar, if I remember correctly, and Captain was it Yorkie? Yeah, Captain Yorkie. Anyway, so and Captain Yorkie was their captain. Nonetheless, though, it seemed like there was like a love-hate relationship between the rest of the crew members and, of course, the musician / swordsman pirate Brook. We wind up seeing him, you know, prior to skeleton-like Brook, and that particular Brook was not exactly loved by many of his fellow crewmates, because he would get them up first thing in the morning and start playing a tune, you know, and they're like, "Oh God, just stop it with the music," you know. Anyway, we find out that this is what, you know, kind of attracted and really kept Laboon just kind of hanging around them. So we see through a series of almost like a montage, like, you know, series of pages and panels. There's like a montage of their adventures just to try to get onto the Grand Line, and of course all the different things that, you know, that happened. You know, one time, you know, someone goes overboard. Of course, Brook can't jump in to save him because he ate the devil fruit of the dead fruit or whatever it was. And Laboon winds up saving his ass, you know. And then anyway, there's just a couple of other, you know, little quick flashback type deals, you know. Then they save Laboon from this huge sea monster and everything, right? They wind up eventually getting to the point where when they're about to enter the Grand Line, they're like, "Listen, man, we have got to, he's got to go, he's got to get the fuck out of here, okay? Like, we like him, and he's a cool little mascot, crewmate, member, or whatever, but he's a fucking whale, and there's dangerous stuff on the Grand Line, so we got to get rid of him." So they basically, Brook sits down and has a talk with him and says, "Listen, you know, I'm a human, you're a whale, it just could never work out. I know you love us, but you got to get out of here, you know." So they wind up going and taking off, and the, you know, and the Captain Yorkie, so, you know, commands no music to be played or any merriment and all to happen, because that's obviously one of the things that attracts Laboon and brings him in. So they go and wind up leaving and getting onto the Grand Line, and they wind up meeting Crocus on the other end, and their ship got pretty banged up, so they stop, and in exchange for some food and drink, Crocus lets them stay there to make repairs. Long story short, they're there for about 3 months, just chilling, and Laboon winds up showing up, like, immediately. Like, even Crocus, he says, "Is that like your pet or something like that?" You know, so this is how we see, and we get to that point where we know how and why Laboon got left there. So really, when they wind up going to leave off on their journey a few months later, and they're like, "All right, we're going to sail around the world, we're going to get around and come back over the Red Line, and we'll just, you know, come scoop you up." They thought that it was a little bit easier said than done at the time, but nonetheless, you know, that's how we find out everything connects with Crocus. And I don't know if it's Crocus or Crocus, but I think they said Crocus in the anime, but I think I pronounce it Crocus because it looks like Crocus. But anyway, whatever. So we know how that all wound up happening. They made their promise to come back to Laboon, of course, once they had sailed around the entirety of the Grand Line. So then we go and we see them out on the Grand Line, and this is where there's like a flashback in a flashback. We see 3 years later and what have you, we see some of the trials and tribulations they've had on the Grand Line, but we keep flashing back and forth to is Brook as a skeleton now, and just dead crew members everywhere, right, on the ship. and him going, there's one panel where he's actually going and putting them, placing them in coffins, you know. And so this has got to be after the entire crew obviously was decimated or killed or what have you. And I thought he mentioned when he first met up with the Straw Hats what happened to his crew, but you know, if he did, it escapes me, and hopefully it'll wind up coming back and getting mentioned here in this flashback, because the way the chapter ends, it's still in the flashback, so I'm assuming that it does. But anyway, we see though the crew. Obviously, that flashback that he's having on there of when they actually were still on the Grand Line and still a functioning crew, kind of going through some of these different areas, you know, going this whatever way down the Grand Line, and the captain, of course, receiving a bigger bounty a couple of different times just because of, you know, becoming more famous as this pirate, you know, and the Rumbar Pirates, right? So they go sailing on their journey. There's one point where something about their government headquarters, it says, or whatever, and he's like, oh, we'll just do what we always do. And I don't know if I misinterpreted something, but I thought he was like, they were just basically like, fuck it, we're going to attack them. I don't know. They wind up going and saying, though, at some point that a bunch of the crew members, about a dozen of the crew members, including the captain, have come down with some kind of plague, and this plague was contracted from some jungle that they were at prior to that. I don't know if that has anything to do with Jaya and the whole thing with the tree plague and everything else, even though that was hundreds of years ago. I don't know. I'm sure it'll wind up eventually being explained or linked around in some way, shape, or form, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But I thought it was, you know, it was worth noting that Captain Yorkie eventually goes, and at the end of this chapter, it looks like him and some other crew members that are sick are actually going to go off on their own, and Brooke is going to go off on, like, with the guys that are not sick and continue on their journey. Their goal was to go and try to get out of the Grand Line through the Calm Belt. I don't know if maybe hoping if they get back to the West Blue where they were originally from, hopefully they'll be able to, you know, be able to cure themselves from the plague. I don't know, but everybody, you know, knows that going through the Calm Belt is certainly like suicide, unless you have the government, you know, ships with the sea prisms on them. So. But anyway, that's really all that happens in here. We wind up getting, you know, it's kind of a sentimental send-off. The captain wanted Brooke to go and play him a tune before he left. That tune, Binks Brew. So there's obviously some significance to that song and why everybody likes that song, why Brooke, of course, likes playing that song. I'm assuming it's because it reminds him fond memories, of course, of his crew that he was with for all the years that he was with them. So that's how things, you know, wrap up. And to tell you the truth, for me, it wasn't a very entertaining chapter. Just knowing that Laboon was the whale and there was that connection and everything else would have been more than enough for me. And I understand, you know, the reason of wanting to go and flesh out this character a little more is I'm sure he's going to wind up joining the Straw Hats, or I feel like he's going to. That's usually the only people that Oda really focuses, you know, heavy time in flashbacks on. But I just don't find the flashback, at least so far, that interesting. Maybe there'll be some good surprises or twists in it. Overall, I think it's okay. It's just that, you know, sometimes these transition periods when you come out of the heavy balls-to-the-wall action that we had like 2 chapters ago, it takes me a couple chapters to fully wind down and really kind of get back to appreciating the series for what it's worth, which is great storytelling. And that's really what it's about. So, my chapter question for you, though, brothers and sisters, is what are your thoughts overall on the crew of the Rumbar Pirates? And I think it's the Rumbar, Dumar, well, anyway. What were your thoughts overall on, you know, just kind of the crew and Captain Yorkie and everything else, you know, that had transpired, and just kind of us getting this whole little montage flashback and then eventually a flashback within a flashback about this crew and the kind of their exploits, starting from the West Blue, meeting Laboon, crossing Reverse Mountain, getting onto the Grand Line, and then, of course, just starting to make a name for themselves on the Grand Line until, unfortunately, it seems like sickness and plague befell them. So let me know what your thoughts are on that, just the flashback in general, in the comments down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We will look forward to catching all of you in the next one, Nation.
Thanks for watching. Remember to check me out over on Facebook and Twitter if you want.